Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Daisy. Today, in spirit of Halloween, I will be reading my subscribers' scary Halloween stories. So if you guys are interested, grab your snacks, grab your cobija, and let's get straight into it. Hi Daisy. I've had several paranormal encounters, but this one that I'm about to share is the most memorable. This encounter happened to me on Halloween night. My dad was in the army and was stationed in Hawaii at the time. That is where this event took place. It was Halloween of 1998. I was 10 years old at the time. My parents decided that they would take us, my siblings, and I camping in another base. This base was called Barber's Point, and it was a Navy base that had recently closed down that same year. So the base itself was pretty desolate and eerie, like an abandoned town. There was a camping site on the base, and being that the base was closed down, we were the only ones there. Once we got to the base, we got settled in, and it started to get dark when my older sister told my mom that she needed to use the restroom. My mom asked me to go accompany her, which the restroom was down a dark dirt road with trees on both sides. The only thing we had to light our path was a small keychain flashlight, which weren't very bright. Once we went to the restroom, I waited for my sister to do her business. Then we proceeded to head back to the campsite. I recall my sister saying, "Wow, it's so dark out here." Then she said, "You know what would be scary? It would be scary if someone was chasing us right now." I told her to stop talking like that because I didn't find her comment humorous. Then suddenly, my sister turned around and said, "What was that?" I told her I don't know what she was talking about. I didn't hear anything. Then let out a loud scream and took off running, leaving me in the darkness. At first, I thought she was trying to be funny, but she never came back. I started running, trying to catch up with her, but she was too far down the road to the point where I couldn't even see her. That's how dark this road was. Then, to my horror, I heard another set of footsteps behind me, accompanied with heavy breathing. That's when I realized I wasn't alone and I really was being chased by someone or something. I tried to run faster and I started praying and asking Jesus to please help me. I was petrified and I felt so helpless. Praying to Jesus was my only assurance. I suddenly heard a voice in my head that said, "Shine your light behind you." As crazy as it sounds, I realized that's a good idea. The thought crossed my mind that if I was attacked or kidnapped, I could identify the perpetrator. So I did as the voice instructed and I shined my flashlight behind me. Then the voice told me, "Shine the light behind you again, but this time I want you to turn around and look." All the while, I felt like this thing was getting closer and catching up to me. I gathered the strength to turn around and shine my light at whoever was chasing me. What I saw was a figure that was all black that looked to be about 3 feet tall. It looked like it was hunched over with claw-like fingers, skinny legs, and disheveled hair. I couldn't make out any distinguishing features, only the outline of it. I watched as this demonic being was lifted into the air and flung into the ditch to my left and disappeared in the darkness. And all of this happened in an instant. I continued running to get back to the campsite. It felt like I was running for an eternity. When I got back to the campsite, I told my parents what happened. I don't know if they believed me or not, but they didn't bother going to investigate. I truly believe this being was a demon. From what I saw, it did not look like a human being. God allowed me to watch as He delivered me from this entity. He picked it up and quickly flung it into the ditch to get it away from me. I don't try to push my beliefs on people, but I believe there is a higher power, and I also believe there are dark forces. Be careful what you speak into existence, because there is a power in the tongue, and I believe my sister spoke that evil into existence that night accidentally. From DEBORAH. Hey Daisy, I would like to share with you my paranormal encounter I had while working at a department store. Now let me start off by saying that paranormal activity would happen rarely throughout the year, but for some reason I noticed the activity to heighten in the month of October. Yes, Halloween time. At my job, people would hate to close, me included, since we could feel the energy shift at night. The energy would feel heavy, especially when there weren't any customers in the store. Sometimes I would feel like I would see shadows from the corner of my eye, but I always brushed it off as me being paranoid. But one night, that night being the night of Halloween, I confirmed it wasn't my paranoia. The store had already closed, so there weren't any customers. I was actually very excited to get off of work since I had a Halloween party to go to, so my mind was preoccupied with other things. Anyways, I was in charge of tidying up the dressing rooms. Usually my coworker, who was also my friend, would help me out, but that night they had assigned him to do something else. I was putting clothes away when I heard my name being called out. I couldn't make out from where, but it sounded like a male voice. They called out again, "Jessica." That is when I realized it came from inside the dressing rooms. I didn't think much of it. I thought maybe my friend had entered when I wasn't looking. So naturally, I went to see what he wanted. I called out my friend's name, but I got no response. One of the bigger stalls' door was wide open, so I walked towards it thinking my friend had found something weird, since we have seen a lot of weird things that people leave in the dressing rooms. So as I got closer to the stall, it slowly started closing, creating that squeaky door sound. I began to hear footsteps behind me, so I instantly turned around and saw that it was my friend. Chills ran down my back. Still not processing things, I automatically assumed that there was a person hiding in the stall. I ran to my coworker, fear written all over my face. I told him what was going on. So, of course, he goes to check and he yells out, "There's no one here." I was standing in the only exit that someone could possibly run out from. So when I heard him say that, I instantly froze. He came out with a weird expression on his face and continued to tell me there was no one, that he checked every stall. I told him I heard my name twice and saw with my own eyes the door stall closing. That is when he told me that earlier that day, as he was clocking into work, he saw a black shadow enter the lunchroom. He went to check and saw no one. And as we told the other coworkers what had happened, they all pointed out the day, October 31st, Halloween. Now, I don't know if there is a correlation, but one thing's for sure, that store is definitely haunted. Hi Daisy, my name is Anne. I have a story to tell that happened on the night of Halloween 2020. The night of Halloween, my siblings and I had a small party. We all got a little drunk and just had a really fun time. A few hours later, we had sobered up and we all decided that we wanted to go to a cemetery to do something spooky in spirit of Halloween. When we arrived, it was pitch black and there were no streetlights except for one a block away. Since it was so dark, we just used our phones as flashlights. Everyone somehow all separated. I was with my sister's friend and my sister-in-law. And as we walked down a hill of gravestones, in the distance, we saw a person walking towards us. We couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but all we know that it was for sure walking towards us. Our instinct was just to run back with my other siblings, trying our best not to scream. Once we found them, we told them what we saw, and they shrugged it off as being another person in the cemetery. So we shrugged it off as well. After a while, we decided to go to another cemetery close to our house just to explore. But this time arriving at the second cemetery, I immediately got chills. A few minutes after exploring, we heard a girl scream. We were kind of spooked out, but we thought, hey, it's Halloween. Maybe it's just some teenagers playing a prank on us. So again, we shrugged it off. After being there for a while, we just decided to go back home. When we arrived at our house, my brother's friend looked spooked. So I asked her what was wrong, but she just said, nothing, I'm fine. I didn't think much of it and just went off to bed. The next morning, we were all talking about what happened the night before, and my brother's friend told us that she thinks something followed her here. That in the middle of the night, she woke up and she felt someone grabbing her foot. She had thought it was my other brother since he was sleeping next to her on the couch, so she just went back to sleep. But she woke up an hour later and saw a figure behind the couch. She was able to see it through the reflection of the mirror, so she looked behind the couch, but there was no one there. A week later, my brother and his girlfriend also had an encounter. They said that when they were brushing their teeth, they heard someone walk towards the kitchen table and put their keys and bags down on the table. Mind you, my mom and I were at my uncle's house, so they were home alone. My brother yelled out, "Mom, is that you?" But of course, no response. They immediately left and went to my uncle's house. Now you might be wondering, why am I telling you this? Well, you see, ever since we moved into that house, nothing paranormal has ever happened. But after visiting the cemeteries that night of Halloween, that is when weird things started happening in our house. We now hear random noises in the living room or in the kitchen in the middle of the night. Our belongings being moved from where they originally were, and that's what scares us the most. It only makes us believe that we definitely brought something home that Halloween night. Sincerely, Anne. Hello Daisy, I have been wanting to share this story with you and now have found the time to do so. In 2017, I separated from my son's father. My son and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment and it took a while for us to get back into the groove of things. It didn't take much for me to soon feel a weird vibe about our now home. When I would drop off my son to school or when he would stay with his dad, I didn't feel like I was alone. It felt as if someone was there, always watching me. Well, as the holidays came, it was difficult for me to not have my son for some holidays. His father and I had agreed that he would be with him for Halloween. Having that in mind, I tried to plan some things to do for that night to just help distract my mind. I just ended up getting some snacks, ordered pizza, and watched some horror movies in the living room. I began to doze off on the couch when I heard what sounded like footsteps in the kitchen. At first, I didn't think much of it since these apartment walls were practically paper thin, so I ignored it. But then I heard the footsteps again, this time much louder and closer. I instinctually got up from the kitchen and ran to turn on every light. The hallway light, the living room light, the kitchen light. I turned the TV off and stood in the middle of the small living room in silence. I began to think, maybe I was just dreaming it. I stood there for a while, just trying to process what I heard, when I heard a faint little girl's giggle coming from my son's room. I don't know how, but I gathered up all of my things and ran out to my car. I just sat in my car in disbelief. Yes, I have encountered some paranormal activity in my life, but nothing like this. I called my son's father since he lived the closest, and I told him exactly what had happened. He came to the apartments to make sure no one was inside the house, while my son and I stayed outside, and sure enough, there was no one. Needless to say, I did not stay there that night. After that night, I continued to hear strange noises, but thankfully, I never heard that little laugh again. Hi Daisy, about 2 years ago, my mom was telling us some scary stories that happened to her back in her prime when she was just a teenager. She said every year for Halloween, my uncle, his friends, and her would meet up at his friend's apartment to hang out. But this year, they decided not to stay in and instead do something spooky. So time goes by and everyone gathers up to go out for a drive. As they were driving around, they stopped at one of the cemeteries in their area. One of my uncle's friend had brought in a Ouija board, and as soon as they started playing, they heard what was a loud scream. They looked around and didn't see anyone. So they all got scared and everyone started running off in different directions. My mom had mentioned that this cemetery was huge, so they struggled to find their way out since there were no lights besides the moonlight. As soon as some of them made their way out, they drove off thinking everyone made it out with them. When they got home, they started freaking out because they realized they had left one of my uncle's friends behind. My uncle and his friends went back for him but couldn't find him anywhere. So instead, they decided to wait for him back home. He didn't come home until hours later. He had a pale look on his face, as if something terrible had happened to him. Everyone was asking him if he was okay, and of course, asking what had happened to him. But he never responded. He instead went straight to bed, and the next morning, he didn't even come out of his room. My uncle went to check up on him and asked him what was wrong, since it was very unlike him. He told my uncle that after everyone split up, he was trying to look for his way out, that he was in such a panic, he freaked out and jumped the fence. As soon as he made it towards a parking lot, he saw a car that resembled my uncle's car. He then heard a voice coming from the car calling out his name, so he ran towards it, getting in the car without thinking twice. As soon as he looked at the driver, he saw, in his own words, La Muerte. He jumped out and ran for his life. He said he doesn't even know how the hell he made it home. My uncle said that his friend was so scared that he eventually lost his color. He was so pale and lost a lot of weight, which wasn't like him because he was a chunky fella. After that encounter, my uncle and my mom said they would never step foot into a cemetery ever again. Monica. So that was it for today's video. If you guys have any spooky story that you would like for me to share on my channel, please send it in at daicyspooks@gmail.com. I know I sound like a broken record, but I have to remind you guys, of course. But other than that, I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your guys' Halloween and stay safe. I hope to see you all in my next one. Bye.